Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. In 2011, I made a video about Portal 2, and I said this.
I have to object to the idea of paying for in-game items in a game like this on day one. People might ask, well, you were alright with the other one, right? Well, I kinda was. And by the other one, of course, I mean the man-conomy in Team Fortress 2. And you wanna know why I'm alright with that? That would be because they already gave us a ton of free content for that. This is a brand new game, and from day one, they've actually spent development time that really should have been spent on things for everybody who purchased the game on launch, putting together something like this.
It's now 2015, and in reference to Evolve, I said this. As a direct result, I feel that the reaction to all of this is completely and totally out of proportion. It's DLC, yes. I get it. It's day one DLC. I also get that. You know I don't like that. But it's cosmetic only. And as we are well aware by now, I would hope, after learning a little bit about how this process works, cosmetic DLC is often made in the time when the game is being polished up and finished off prior to its release, because the art team has nothing else to do with their time. I don't mind. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed someone changing their mind on the internet. Over the course of about 4 years, but changing their mind nonetheless. I no longer hold the opinion that I did in 2011 in regards to Portal 2's cosmetic DLC. Frankly, I don't care, and I don't know why I cared in the first place. Indeed, I couldn't give a good reason as to why I cared in the first place, because I didn't give a good reason when I stated it in the first place. I think perhaps the only really good explanation is that in 2011, this stuff was less prolific. Since then, cash shops in games have become somewhat commonplace, aggressive DLC practices and season passes, as well as pre-order bonuses, have been pushed further and further and further into our gaming lifestyle. And is that a good thing? Well, hell no, it's not a good thing. However, at this point, one has to ask whether or not we're picking our battles correctly. With Evolve, there were a number of issues from a PR standpoint when it came to the game. And a lot of that came from the publisher's inability to properly communicate. 2K and, to a lesser extent, Turtle Rock Studios were unable to communicate the idea that actually Evolve is a complete game at $60 and all of these other additions are pretty much exactly the same at launch, but will guarantee you stuff later down the line which isn't actually done yet. This was the problem, and this is a current problem that Evolve is facing from a PR standpoint. And this is as the result of aggressive pre-order bonuses and aggressive pushing of DLC on the customer. And one can view it as something of a breaking point. A boiling point that has been reached by the consumer to the level that they just can't be bothered with it anymore. They don't want to deal with it. The cash shop in-game was just the icing on the cake. Indeed, we still have people that genuinely believe that you can actually buy content on day one in the game that actually affects it in some way. And they're wrong. You can't. You simply cannot. But whose fault is it really? Well, we live in an outrage culture of social media. A small thing can blow up into a giant thing over the course of a couple of hours. We saw it quite recently with the H1Z1 controversy, which turned out to really be nothing whatsoever. Claims that you couldn't buy weapons in-game were in fact disproved by quotes that were made 6 months prior, but then fudged as the result of a PR flub on a stream and one instance of a airdrop dropping a little bit too close to a streamer, which was then interpreted as, OMG, you can buy crate drops which give you guns, ergo pay to win, ergo you lied, and then everything exploded all over Reddit for the course of a number of days. That's a thing that happened. That is not a hypothetical. This is the sort of thing that can happen when you don't properly communicate to your audience. Because yes, people will take an idea and run with it. Now, with H1Z1, I have a certain degree of sympathy for the developer because really, there wasn't that much inconsistency with what they'd said, especially if you'd happened to pay attention to the things that they'd been saying prior to that in previous interviews regarding the airdrop system. And again, it's an early access title. These kind of problems are to be expected. If you don't want that, don't buy into early access, ever. With Evolve, what we had was an aggressive marketing strategy that seemed to just confuse people more so than anything else. A myriad of different editions available. If you bought a digital edition of Evolve, there were 4 choices. You could get the standard edition, you could get the pre-order edition, the digital deluxe edition, and the PC Monster Race edition. This is hardly the first time that we've seen this, but it is certainly one of the more egregious examples of trying to get more money out of the consumer prior to release. And really, I feel that this kind of thing has the tendency of backfiring. Why? Because when you see a selection of editions like that, not only are you ultimately confused because you don't actually have a reference point to judge by. Do I know whether or not I'm going to like this game enough to want 18 hunters eventually instead of 12? Do I want the 5th monster? Will I even be playing by that point? Do I care enough about playing this specific character in order to get this particular skin? What is the Hunter's Season Pass? Why is that different to the Monster's Season Pass? These are all confusing things, but more to the point, they also make the consumer feel like they're missing out on something. They feel like they're not getting the complete experience, even if they kind of are. And that is the problem with releasing multiple editions like that. That is why it's a stupid idea. However, why the change of heart since 2011? Why do I think that in-game cosmetic DLC is okay now on day one, whereas in 2011 I didn't think it was? Well, I couldn't even tell you why I didn't think it was okay in 2011, because as I said, I don't think I actually had a good reason for it, other than this vague principle, this ideal that everything that's on the disc on day one should be available to everyone on day one. That's a principle. But what's it based on? I mean, is there a real reason to complain when cosmetic DLC monster skins and skins for your guns are available within Evolve on day one? Does it affect the game in any objective sense? And the answer to that is, well, no, it actually doesn't. Did the skins for the robots in Portal 2 actually have any objective impact on the game at all? No. No, they didn't. So why was I so angry? I think it comes back around to what I was saying earlier. It's the feeling of incompleteness. It's the idea that you bought a game, and then the game shoves the idea that actually you didn't get everything, even if all of this stuff is completely worthless. You see that little eyeglass that you didn't get that could have been on your robot? You could have had that. You don't have that, because the game says you can't have it unless you pay us a little bit extra dosh. It just doesn't feel right. But it not feeling right isn't really a good justification for anything, is it? It doesn't objectively make the game worse in any respect. There's no way to buy power within a game like Evolve. And yet we're angry about it anyway. And that indicates to me that it is a PR problem. Now here's where I'm not going to invalidate your feelings, or at least I'm going to try not to. As a PR problem, it's kind of up to you as the consumer to determine whether or not you find something particularly acceptable. If I find cosmetic Day 1 DLC to be acceptable, that doesn't mean that you should. There's no real reason for you to. It really comes down to your own personal feelings. And if a company has managed to betray your trust enough, has managed to shake your faith in them enough, then the response to that is to simply not buy their product at full price. If that occurs, then the system is, as far as I'm concerned, working as intended. The company overreached, you as the consumer exercised your consumer right to punish them for doing so. All of that said, do I really think that we should be so concerned about cosmetic Day 1 DLC? These days, no, I do not. And the main reason for that is that over the past few years, I learned a lot more about the development process, and particularly the idea that should have been fairly obvious to me, and I don't really know why it didn't come up previous, that in the last few months, particularly in the certification process for the game for consoles, the artists aren't really doing anything. The game's gone gold, the artists are finished, all of their work is done prior to all of the other things that the rest of the team is doing. You can't simply retask an artist to go and fix bugs. That's not how game development works. People have specific skills. So what do you do with them? Well, someone on my subreddit suggested that you fire them, which sounds like an incredibly stupid idea, and I can't imagine that anyone would want to be an artist in the industry if their job was that insecure. Considering how insecure game development jobs are already, that is hardly something that we should be encouraging, is it? No, that's a very silly idea indeed. So what do? Well, they work on other things, cosmetic stuff. In this case, cosmetic DLC. Now, the argument that is being made by the consumer, by many consumers at any rate, is simply this. If it's been made prior to the release of the game, it should be free in the game on day one. You can make that argument, absolutely. And I'd probably, to some degree, agree with you. I think it should be in the game. But I'm not going to sweat it if it's not. And that's really the big difference, isn't it? Does it really matter? that it's not in the game on day one for free for everybody? Does it matter that there are $2 weapon skins available in Evolve that do not affect the game in any way, shape, or form? No, at least in my honest opinion. Here's the thing that is really annoying me about the Evolve situation, because people are focusing on this, and they're not focusing on the incredibly silly way that they're doing their future DLC. So with the launch of Evolve, you got something called the Hunting Season Pass. Now you might think, alright, well that's obvious what that is. It's a Season Pass. You're going to get all the content that you get with Evolve in future as the DLC is released, and it costs about the same price as you would expect a Season Pass to, about $25. So yeah, that's a Season Pass, and I'm going to get everything for it. Here's the problem, you're not going to get everything for it. And that's where the real issue lies. The Hunting Season Pass is separate to the Monster DLC, which is currently not available yet. The Evolve Hunting Season Pass gives you 4 new hunters when available and 3 exclusive Magma Monster skins for the Goliath, the Kraken, and the Wraith. So, skins, okay, who cares, and 4 hunters. Now, do we agree that the hunters should be paid for DLC? I would say so. Paying for the monsters and paying for the hunters is, as far as I'm concerned, a pretty good way of doing things, and I approve of this more than selling maps, which inherently split the community. This is a DLC practice that does not split the community, and in fact offers you variety despite the fact that you may not actually own the DLC. As far as I'm concerned, this is a good way of doing things, offering this degree of content that can be mixed and matched in with people that don't already have it, especially with the monster. If you add the monster in there, you're essentially paying for other people's entertainment at that point. Obviously yours too, because you want to play the new monster, but if you have a new monster, people that don't have that monster pack can queue into you and fight you. That's a good thing. That's a great way of doing DLC. But the problem is, they're splitting it up into 2 components, and they're doing it in a way that's frankly quite confusing. Why is the Hunting Season Pass separate to the Monster Pass? And if I am told correctly, the monster is going to cost $15. So what you're telling me is, we're going to have 2 monsters at $15 each, unless you ended up buying the Monster Race Edition or whatever. So that's $30, and then you're going to sell us 4 hunters for $25, and you're going to tell me that's a deal because it has skins in it. Okay. So now, we're suddenly up to $55 worth of DLC, which is pretty much the cost of the game. Now there's where your objections lie, because let's look at what the game actually has. The base game has 12 hunters and 3 monsters, along with a myriad of maps and modes. The DLC has 4 hunters, 2 monsters, and costs about as much, and you have to buy it separately. You have to buy the Hunting Season Pass, and then you have to buy each monster individually, unless you purchase the Monster Race Edition, which was like $100, and frankly, if you bought that prior to release, then I don't know what the hell you're doing, because you had no idea whether or not you're going to be even playing this game in a few months. That is the problem. It's not the cosmetic skin DLC. It's not even the way that they're actually doing the DLC in terms of selling monsters and hunters. That's fine. That's actually good. I prefer that over selling game modes and maps. But the price model is completely out of whack, and that's what really bothers people. I think that's why we've reached this boiling point. People are just sick and tired of being milked for everything they've got. And I think that just this day one DLC stuff, even though it's completely irrelevant, pushed some people over the edge. And I don't necessarily blame them, because who's responsible for the years and years and years of DLC nonsense? And can you seriously point to the majority of DLC and say that it's actually worth your money and time? I bet you can't. I really genuinely do not believe that you can make that argument. Most DLC is not very good. And even the companies that have historically made good DLC have recently made poor DLC. We're looking at ridiculously priced stuff for Destiny. We're looking at overpriced stuff for Borderlands. We're looking at Game of the Year editions for Borderlands that don't actually contain all of the DLC. Season passes that don't contain all of the DLC. That's why people are so hostile at this point, because they view DLC as the enemy. They view games as service platforms to be milked for DLC later on. And I don't inherently object to DLC. Of course I want new content for my game, if it's worth paying for, but it so rarely is. Ultimately, I do miss the days of expansion packs. We don't get that many of them. And when we do get them, it turns out they actually end up being pretty good. Whenever Blizzard releases an expansion, it's generally a good time. It's got a lot of content, and most people feel like it's actually worth the price. And we also have indie studios doing the same thing. We got Dragonfall out of Shadowrun Returns, which ended up being better than the base game. We see titles like Age of Wonders 3 get expansions or mini expansions via DLC, and everything's fine, and everyone loves that kind of stuff. And then we see things like Evolve, where ignoring the Day 1 DLC, it's hard not to feel like you're getting an incomplete experience simply because of the way the game was marketed to you in the first place. That's got a great deal to do with it. And it's strange because I think a lot of these companies really believe right now that they have to talk about DLC early on, otherwise people won't believe that the game's actually going to get the support it needs. Do we really need to do that? Do we really need to mar the game in discussions of DLC just as it's coming out the gate? Can we not let the game breathe for a few months? Give it a couple of months to just breathe and play out on its own. And then we can talk about DLC, then we can talk about expansion content. It's a blitz when it comes to buying a modern game. Buying a modern game is actually kind of an unpleasant experience. We're constantly being marketed to with different editions and pre-order bonuses. We're being made to feel like we're being punished if we don't take a risk in the first place, going after a pre-order bonus, because we end up getting an incomplete edition or we miss out on a piece of content that we would have otherwise gotten. And yet, game quality seems to be going down and down and down when it comes to Day 1 releases. Just 2014 was completely riddled with poor launches, as you're well aware, stuff that just didn't even work. It seems like we're at a time when consumer confidence should be rightfully at an all-time low, and this is not the time to be milking DLC. This is the time to be rebuilding the consumer trust that the industry has lost over the past 12 months. I still don't care about Day 1 hat DLC. I changed my mind since 2011, and I'm probably going to stick with that. It seems to be a reality of the industry right now, and frankly, it's one of the least possible egregious things that the industry could be doing. This is an industry that is okay with a cash shop in a game on Day 1 that involves skipping content. Can I even trust the game to be properly paced if you have such a thing? No, I cannot. So in worlds of that, in worlds of exclusive characters for pre-order bonuses, in worlds where exclusive overpowered weapons are available on Day 1 if you buy a particular piece of DLC, I'm not going to fret and I'm not going to sweat over a few hats. My name's been TotalBiscuit, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.